Alright, so you just finished your quiz, so we're going to be doing some more of the graphs. Unit 7, Day 4. Down here, I'm on page 17 now. So fill in some of the box, or fill in all the box and make the graph of the top. Oops, daisy, I have a double equal sign there. So there's the box filled in. So this is just review of what we've done so far. The next thing up, we are going to be shifting the graph left or right. So it's not necessarily going to have this point here. It may move over here and start kind of up here and go, or it may move to the left and start here. So when it crosses the y-axis, it's not necessarily going to be at the origin, or it's not necessarily going to have the cosine value on the y-axis when we start. Alright, so nothing has changed. So the a value, the amplitude is in front of the sine or cosine. B is next to the x. And now this is going to be the c value. This is going to be your right or left shift. Translation. Alright, so just a review. When it's inside parentheses like this, it's opposite of what it looks like, because it's always x minus and then whatever the value is. Adding, so this actually shifts the graph left. So the amplitude still stays the same at 1. The period is 2 pi over b, so 2 pi over 1. So still, we're working on 2 pi this time. That's not going to change. We can always determine the starting point. So instead of working with this sort of stuff up here, we can just do something a little bit different. Whatever is in the parentheses, we take it and set it equal to 0. Okay, so I take that equal to 0. So the x, the starting point, is negative pi over 6. And then we figure out the distance between them, or the interval, the same way. Do the period divided by 4. So, and for this case, it's 2 pi over 4, so it's pi over 2. So, knowing the starting point, again, is going to be in negative pi over 6, add with pi over 2, and you're going to get pi 1/3 pi, or pi over 3. Okay, so this is going to be the first point on the graph at negative pi over 6. I don't necessarily make another point at the origin, so that may not be one of your points here. The next point on the graph is going to be pi over 3 here. And then I take and I add the interval again, so pi over 2, and I get 5 pi over 6. Okay, so that's my next point here. Again, it doesn't matter the order you do this. So add pi over 3, pi over 2 again, plus pi over 2, and I'm going to end up with 4 pi over 3. Again, if you're not comfortable with fractions, make sure you're comfortable with adding fractions on the calculator. And if I add again for number 5, I'm going to end up with 11 pi over 6. So 4 pi over 3, 11 pi over 6. So really all that's changing is we're still doing the sine curve. Sine starts here, 0. It goes, oh, I need my amplitude, don't I? So 1 and negative 1. So the next line, I'm going up to 1. The next line, I'm going down, 0. Wah. The next line, I'm going down to negative 1. The next one, I'm coming up to 0. So all it's doing is taking it and it's just shoving the graph right or left. Now, you can say it was really easy to determine our period because you just do from 0 out to that number. Now, our period doesn't exactly look like 2 pi, but the period is also the end minus the beginning. So you can determine if it's that far by doing the end value, so 11 pi over 6, subtract the beginning value. So and that gives me 12 pi over 6, which is also 2 pi. So that works out. So the period is always the end minus the beginning, and you can check in between these and it checks out. Alright, so the next one. The amplitude, the B, the C. So start working through the stuff. If you think you're good, pause it here and then we'll keep going. Amplitude 1, period, 2 pi over 2. So 1 pi. The distance between the values, pi over 4. All right, again, set the parentheses equal to 0. And you'll get in your start value determining where you start. So 2x minus pi is equal to 0. Okay, so 2x is equal to pi. X is equal to pi over 2. So this time, our graph actually starts to the right of the origin. Okay, so my starting point here is pi over 2. And I have the cosine and amplitude one, -1. Okay, so it does go to the left and it goes through the y-axis, but since we're only doing one period right now, I'm actually starting my graph here at pi over 2. So it's going to be shift everything's off to the right of the y-axis. All right, so period is pi. So my interval is pi over 4. So I'm going to add that every time. All right, so my start point is pi over 2. So my next one plus pi over 4 is 3 pi over 4. Plus pi over 4 is pi, and then 5 pi over 4, and then 6 pi over 4, which is 3 pi over 2. Now you can again determine if your period works and do 3 pi over 2, the end, minus the beginning, and you get 2 pi over 2, which is pi, which is what we're looking for. So that matches my period of pi. So cosine, to make the curve, cosine starts up, 0, down, 0, up. All right, so this last one here, go through all of this, double check it. I'm going to pause the video here and so I can upload it, and then I'm going to post what this looks like as a picture on the Classroom so you can double check to make sure we match. And I'll have a picture of all my information, so check what this one is. And I also do example 4. This is like what you had on the bonus. We're going to shift it up 2. Now this is called the D value. We sometimes write it after, sometimes write it before. So it's going to shift the Y values everything up 2. So we're changing kind of like our 0 line from being at 0. We're making kind of the 0 line here at positive 2. Everything goes up 2 from there. So I will post a picture of this on Classroom, and your homework to finish up is just to start a few problems to make sure we know where we start and where we end at. So I would just like you to do on page 19, just do numbers 1 through 3. Just fill in these 3 pieces of information and see if we can get the starting and ending points for that. So talk to you later. Bye.